Well, welcome. There's no captions. I hope that's nice. But it's also because I'm just going to be going on without a script. So I wanted to go over this book, Rewriting Scripture in Second Temple Times by Sidnie Crawford. She's a professor at University of Nebraska who's clearly studied the Dead Sea Scrolls all her life. And I want to do it for myself because I want to remember the highlights. And I'm about that far in, so I've got a very small amount left. And this is part one. But it's really made the Book of Jubilees mean a lot to me. I will say, though, on the movie made last week or the week before, I've been thinking it actually does make a lot of sense to train a scribe in steel manufacturing, or because you want to train someone who is already pretty experienced, who's already educated, who has ability in other metals, who's probably upper class, really just for security and things like that. So actually it does make sense. If you were going to try to train someone, you'd probably want to get someone who's a scribe. I was thinking about that. Speaking of scribes, so what is with this rewriting the scripture? Basically, she says that term can be offensive because Christians and rabbinical Jews really view scripture as fixed, and that's how it is, right? But early on, we've got that oral tradition in the First Temple period, and there might be several tellings of a version of a story, and it might include pieces or not include pieces. That is what is called interscriptural exegesis. The Second Temple period times saw many versions of the same story. For instance, with Abraham, she talks about sometimes Abraham said Sarai is his sister. Other times, Sarai says that Abraham's the brother. Another one says that Pharaoh took Sarai, so it just kind of dodges the whole thing. I think one says that she's gone 5 years. The other one says she's gone 2 years. And then Pharaoh gives gifts to Abraham and Sarai. And in one version, that's before they take her. So it almost seems like Abraham's almost like selling her and looking out for his own skin and selling her. But in another version, almost because he's sorry, he gives gifts. And then I think it's in that version as well. Pharaoh says that he didn't defile her, didn't sleep with her. Although other versions make it seem like they did. So I guess that's sort of the one thing that's going on, is there's lots of details of lots of different stories. And then some versions, are just missing things. So that leads to harmonization. It's just best if I just show you an example of harmonization. So if you can see this, here's a version of Exodus, here's a version of Deuteronomy, and then this is the Samaritan Pentateuch. And their Exodus, it's like the scribe just took everything and just included it. Same with over here. Basically, harmonization is, if any version says anything, we'll just include it. So we'll have everything. But then also, you've got the small details, so often you can avoid them. For instance, I think in this version, they just say Pharaoh took Sarai, just to avoid everything and technically be correct, I guess. So that's interesting. So that's what rewriting scripture is, or reworking the Pentateuch. There's something called the Pesher. So the Pesher is what eventually will start happening, which is just commentary. So you have a fixed text followed by commentary. Fixed text, commentary. And so we see really the evolution of the literary tradition from the interscriptural exegesis to this rewriting, which is mostly harmonization. And then you see the Pesher and the commentaries. So, but during this time, there are canonical texts and not canonical texts, right? All right, we'll see if we get cut off here. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. She talks about the law and the prophets, which is kind of their canon. So now we would say the Bible to mean all the canonized books, but back then it was sort of the law and the prophets. But it seems like that was different for every group. And I think the Samaritans called it the law and the prophets and songs, meaning psalms. And she talks about Josephus, kind of commenting on which books are canon, but it's not clear, and different lists are different. So really we don't know what books were canon for them. And so she proposes a criteria, which is, the book has to say it has divine authorship. It has to be quoted several times. And then the way it's quoted is as an authoritative quote. And then it helps if the book is found in multiple copies, but that can be just, a historical accident. So she says that's kind of the weakest criteria. So using that criteria, and so the first one is the Book of Jubilees. So the Book of Jubilees, which was canon to them and canon to the early Christian church, is fascinating, and I want to mostly talk about it. The Book of Jubilees basically follows Genesis and Exodus, but it's new enough that it's different enough that it's its own standalone work. it's a new text. And it's new because just what it includes. So it relies a lot on the Book of Enoch. It has like the Watchers. In the Book of Jubilees, though, the descent of the Watchers, I guess, is a good thing. In the Book of Enoch, it's a negative thing. They're like fallen angels. So, it's tough to know if that's a reference to, Satan's followers and there's other aspects of Jubilees that's kind of mythical. So like when God's creating the earth, there's like the angel of the wind, things like that almost seem maybe a more pagan. But what Jubilees does, it carries some from the Book of Enoch, but it carries from other books too. And it's sort of just trying to include everything into one narrative. And what I like about it is that it was scripture. The way it is cited is that it was canon to the Essenes at Qumran, at least, and then also to the first Christian fathers. So I want to play a clip of Jubilees in just one sec. Jubilees is really amazing. It might have some weird things. Let me tell you what else she says. So there's sort of a agenda, or rather, perhaps there's a bias in it, which is the scribe talking about Levi, seems to be very pro-Levitical. She talks about like Aaron's grandson as murdering someone, but to defend someone else. And so that kind of helped him get the priesthood. And also Levi was the 10th son, if you count from Benjamin up, I guess. And so because of that, he was the tithing of the Lord. And then also there's recurrent themes of the priests being sort of more important, I guess, than the kings. So it's very pro-Levitical. I'm not sure if that's the agenda. So besides that and the few weird things, I guess, it kind of makes sense why it would be excluded. But it's fascinating that it was included initially, especially because of this quote. So you'll recall from Nephi that Nephi is adamant. He is adamant that when the Bible goes from the Jews to the Gentiles, that it is whole, it's intact, and it's pure and easy to understand. That is what I see actually in the Book of Jubilees. What is taken from the book that proceeds from the mouth of a Jew is the plain and precious parts. That's taken by the Gentile church. A lot of scholars, so Joseph Spencer and Terry Gibbons, say that what's taken is the covenant, or the knowledge of the covenant. And so basically there's something called supersessionism believed, which is basically because the Jews crucified Christ, they're no longer the covenant people. And now we're the covenant people, the Gentiles. So we've kind of supplanted them or superseded them. And that's really why it's the Old Covenant. So the Old Testament really means Old Covenant in Greek, even though we might call it the Old Witness. But so there's the Old Covenant, that's gone and done away with. They had their chance, and now it's the New Covenant, which is now it's our turn. So that is very diabolical for lots of reasons, because it doesn't show what God's dealings are. And then if you're not understanding God's dealings, you're not going to really want to work for him or help him. You're not going to be able to have hope, because we're supposed to have hope that we could be on the right hand of God, doing things that God would do. So, we need to know God's dealings, things like that. But what Nephi says is that the Book of Mormon, of course, comes back to make the covenants known. And so on the cover page of the Book of Mormon really is so that Israel knows they are not cast off forever. And that's really what Jubilee starts with. So it tells the creation story, but just listen to this chapter 1.
Chapter 1. It happened in the first year of the exodus of the children of Israel out of Egypt, in the 3rd month, on the 16th day of the month, that God spoke to Moses, saying, Come up to me on the mountain, and I will give you 2 tablets of stone of the law and the commandment, which I have written, that you may teach them. Moses went up into the mountain of God, and the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai, and a cloud overshadowed it 6 days. He called to Moses on the 7th day, out of the middle of the cloud. And the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a flame on the top of the mountain. Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, and God taught him the earlier and the later history of the division of all the days, of the law and of the testimony. He said, Open your heart to every word, which I shall speak to you on this mountain, and write them in a book, in order that their generations may see how I have not forsaken them for all the evil which they have committed, when they transgressed the covenant which I established between me and you, for their generations, this day on Mount Sinai. It will come to pass, when all these things come on them, that they will recognize that I am more righteous than they in all their judgments and in all their actions, and they will recognize that I have truly been with them. Write all these words for yourself which I speak to you today. For I know their rebellion and their stubbornness, before I brought them into the land which I swore to their fathers, to Abraham, and to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, Unto your offspring will I give a land flowing with milk and honey. They will eat and be satisfied. And they will turn to their strange gods, to gods that cannot deliver them from any of their tribulation. And this witness shall be heard for a witness against them. They will forget all my commandments, even all that I command them. And they will walk in the ways of the Gentiles, and after their uncleanness, and after their shame, and will serve their gods. And these will prove to them an offense, and a tribulation, and a sickness, and a trap. Many will perish, and they will be taken captive, and will fall into the hands of the enemy, because they have forsaken my laws, my commandments, and the festivals of my covenant, and my Sabbath, and my holy place, which I have made holy for myself in their presence, and my tabernacle, and my sanctuary, which I have made holy for myself in the midst of the land, that I should set my name on it, that it should reside there. They will make themselves high places, and places of worship, and graven images. Each will worship graven images of his own making. They will go astray. They will sacrifice their children to demons, and to all errors their hearts can walk. I will send witnesses to them, that I may testify against them, but they will not hear. They will kill the witnesses. They will persecute those who seek the law, and they will abolish and change everything, author's note, in the law, so as to work evil before my eyes. I will hide my face from them. I will deliver them into the hand of the Gentiles. They will be captured like prey for their eating. I will remove them from out of the land. I will scatter them among the Gentiles. And they will forget my law, and all my commandments, and all my judgments. They will go astray regarding the observance of new moons, and Sabbath, and festivals, and jubilees, and laws. After this, they will return to me from among the Gentiles, with their heart and all their soul, and with all their strength. And I will gather them from among all the Gentiles, and they will seek me. I shall be found by them when they seek me with all their heart and with all their soul. I will allow them to see abounding peace with righteousness. I will remove them, the plant of unrighteousness, with all my heart and with all my soul. And they shall be for a blessing and not for a curse. And they shall be for the head and not for the tail. I will build my sanctuary among them, and I will dwell with them. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people, in truth and righteousness. I will not forsake them, nor fail them, for I am the Lord their God.
So, wow, is there anything more plain and clear? Whether Jubilees, borrows from other questionable material, we'll say, in the future, just that first chapter is so clear. It makes it obvious that the Jews were always going to reject the gospel, and that despite that, so then it's obvious that they still are the covenant people, which is really what the removal of plain and precious parts is to think that God no longer has a covenant with the Jews. And like I say, that's based on Joseph Spencer and Terry Gibbons' work. So I'm seeing right here, this is definitely a book that fits the criteria in that it was canon, it was preserved by ancient Jews, and then it was given to the early Christian church, and it was counted as canon, and even cited authoritatively by the early Christian fathers. And then both the Eastern and the Western church just disregarded it as apocrypha. So it was, hidden literally, that no one could find it. I mean, I guess it would be hidden anyway because there wasn't a printing press, but I just think, wow, it's so nice to actually hear the covenant discussed so openly, and it gives me a testimony of, God's whole plan, and it really gives me assurance that, God knew this was going to happen all along. Anyway, that's kind of a tangent. So then the next thing she talks about is the temple scroll. I think she has a book just called this one. The temple scroll is obviously interesting, but it did not enjoy authoritative status. Apparently, it's all written in a first person version, so as if God's talking directly to Moses. So he's saying things like that I may turn the fierceness of my anger and show you mercy and have compassion on you and multiply you as I swore to your fathers. Things like that. So it seems to pretend to be authoritative or present itself that way, but I guess no one really copied it for 100 years, and it's not found anywhere else. And this is also a very pro-Levitical text, and interesting, has plans for a huge temple, a new temple, which is why it's called that, the temple scroll. I won't get into it too much more. The Genesis Apocryphon, which I really liked this one because it showed how culture works back then. So the Genesis Apocryphon is not supposed to be scripture in that it's in Aramaic, so it's in the people's tongue, we'll say. And so it's not authoritative, and it borrows from several scriptures, and it basically is sort of what would be taught to, we'll say, the common person. Something like that. It talks a lot about the birth of Noah. All right, well, finish with part 2 in a bit, I guess, but hopefully that makes sense. Just wow with that stuff I discovered, or I guess felt inspired to think about with Book of Jubilees, and it really makes understanding the text a lot easier. It's not quite what I hoped for as far as superscriptions, because I really was trying to identify when a scribe would vary and when they wouldn't. And it looks like those texts that they changed, such as the Temple Scroll, which is authoritative, or presents itself as authoritative, they use superscriptions. They say the words dictated to Moses or the words said to Moses. So it's clearly not just the superscription that will authenticate a copy. I've got other ideas coming up on that. So, all right. Well, I guess let me know what you guys think of Jubilees. Could this be the scripture that was removed, the plain and precious part? What do you think?